Hello and welcome once more to 4 o'clock Sunday Stories. And what's all this about me blubbing? Well, let me tell you. Next Thursday, I have been asked to give a rendition, a story that will be linked to Remembrance Day, to November the 11th, to the end of the Second World War. And I'm telling a story which is vaguely linked to my father and something that happened in 1940. Now, I've written the story out and I have prepared it, the 4 Ps that I often talk about. I prepared it, I've practiced it. I'm almost certain I got the right posture. And every time I rehearsed it, I gave her a great performance, even it was only to myself. But we did the first, the rehearsal of the reading today. And I found myself going through my story, reading it, which I think I might not be able to do, and crying. And that was before I reached the part about my father. Now, you won't be at the meeting, so let me give you a rundown. Basically, in May the 28th, 1940, a battalion from the Royal Warwickshire Regiment was in a small village, Wormhout, in northern France. And their duty, their orders were to hold a position for as long as possible against the German army, including the 1st Panzer Division, while British troops were being evacuated from Dunkirk. And in a battle for over 24 hours, they did just that. They stopped the German army in its tracks. And as we now know, those 24 hours were vital for the success of that operation. At the end of the battle, they surrendered, thinking that it would be 4 years in a prison of war camp, or 5 years even. The German soldiers took them into the small village and started to pack them into a farm shed. And eventually it was so squashed that Captain James Lynn Allen, protested to the Germans that no more men could be fitted in. There were already 100 men in there from disparate battalions and even different countries, all being herded into one hut to await what they thought was going to be transport to the POW camp. What happened next made history. You see, the German soldiers there, or the German officers, were from the SS. And their first action was to throw grenades into the barn. Now, a few, as far as I know, were killed within the first few seconds, but the reason more soldiers weren't killed, because Sergeant Stanley Moore and Sergeant Major Augustus Jennings threw their bodies on top of the grenades and took the full force of the blast. Now, I do ask all of us to just take a moment to think about that action, to throw your body on top of not just one, but maybe a couple of grenades, knowing that it was going to blow you apart. Anyway, seeing that, the Germans decided not to waste any more grenades. So they started to bring out the soldiers in groups of 5 to face a firing squad. Eventually, that was deemed too slow. And so they simply emptied their ammunition into the barn, killing 80 men. Now, I do say in the story, how do we know this? Well, there were survivors, and one of them was Private Bert Evans from Sturchley. His arm mutilated by bullets and shrapnel. His captain, Captain Lynn Evans, saw an opportunity to escape, grabbed Bert, and they made a run for freedom. Unfortunately, a German officer saw them and shot Captain Lynn Evans through the forehead. Bert was hit twice in the neck and fell into a pond. The German officer, thinking it killed them both, left the field. Bert later said, "That's how my captain died, saving my life. He was a fine man and a fine soldier." As it was, he hauled himself out of the pond and across a few fields until he was captured or found again by a German hospital unit. But this time, he said, they weren't SS. They were just normal soldiers. They treated Bert, and he spent 4 years in a POW camp until he was repatriated because of his mangled arm. And he actually died at the age of 92 in 2013. Now, I'll go on to say, what's that got to do with father? Because it turns out he wasn't there. But the point was, he was meant to be there. But training for his sport and for the war effort, he developed flat feet, which meant long marches were virtually out of it. So he was reassigned to anti-aircraft ack guns and 2-inch mortars to defend the homeland. And the story goes that although he never drank in the army, he did manage eventually after the war to be persuaded to go into a pub, and he had 3 pints. A friend escorted him outside, and as they were leaving the door, my dad tripped and knocked a woman over. It turns out that eventually that woman turned out to be my mother. So the story is, flat feet saved my father's life, and 3 pints of beer began my life. But my father never forgot those men that went. And he told the story often, and he never missed a Remembrance Day parade, even doing the last 4 with a walking stick, until dementia made it impossible to go. I'm going to tell the people that those men were my father's heroes, and that my father was my hero. But with the madness of the last 2 years, there will be more wars. And it is possible that all of us might become involved in a conflict of one sort or another. The question is, what sort of hero are we going to be? Now, see, I've told that without crying. So what was the difference this morning? Facing a live audience? Maybe? I don't know. Hopefully, this morning got the tears out. We'll see. But before I went to the rehearsal, I watched a podcast where they were talking to a man who was really in one of the first SOG, which I think is where the forward operations guys, they go out before the main guys go out. And they were in Vietnam, in Cambodia, Laos. And this guy, by all intents and purposes, Tilt, his nickname, Tilt Striker, shouldn't be alive, but he is. And the stories he tells are of heroism. You may agree or disagree with the Vietnam War, but men still have to fight it. Women now have to fight it. And he was asked what he thought of America today. And his views were not complimentary. Now, whether you're anti-war, pro-war, whether you're pro-Ukraine, anti-Russian, or pro-Russian, anti-Ukraine, pro-Israel, anti-Gaza, pro-Gaza, anti-Israel, wars will come. And it will be down to each individual as to how they fight that war. And the fighting of the war will affect their family. So are people going to be prepared to fight for their family? In the 1930s, 1940s, in the 1915, 19, before that, after that, people were prepared to fight for their family. I believe that's changing. I believe that there is a thought that the family is behind the state, that the state is coming first. And that's frightening, just for me anyway. It might not come in my lifetime, but I have got children and grandchildren, and it'll certainly come in theirs. Thanks very much, Rick. Really appreciate it. And it does mean that come the day, I will fight. No doubt. I've been in the war zone, and I'll go again. I'll do it for my family. I'll do it for the man standing next to me, the woman standing next to me. But I'll not take a knee. Promise that. Thanks very much, people. And hopefully we'll be here next week. Same time, same Sunday. Although our clocks have gone backwards, apparently, and nobody told me. Have a great day. Have a great week. Take care.